Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, episode 8, where a show where 2 times a week I talk about a random episode of Star Trek, and today's episode is from season 2, episode 25, episode 25 called the Omega Glory. If you're a Star Trek fan, you're probably familiar with this one. This is one that most people have seen. So, let me just get into it. So it starts off on the bridge of the Enterprise, and Sulu says that we're approaching Omega 4, and there's a ship out there in the distance, and Kirk, asks to magnify the view screen, and we see the ship, and it's the USS Exeter. And there's no life signs aboard. The Exeter has been out there for I think they said 4 months, something like that, and it's been sort of stuck in in the orbit of this planet for that time. So Kirk says to Sulu, we're going to take Spock, McCoy, and a red shirt, and we're going to beam over to the Exeter engine room. So they get there, and all you see is uniforms with little piles of what looks like salt, basically. And Bones starts doing scans, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So they search the other parts of the ship. Same thing. They find nothing but uniforms, and then McCoy tells Kirk that basically the crew is still there, but they've all been reduced to basic chemical crystals. So all the chemicals that are in our bodies, that's what they've been reduced to. So Kirk tells Spock to pull up the last log entry. So he does. There's a guy in a captain's seat, and basically he's warning to anybody who's on this ship to get down to the planet now. And he's falling over, he's and so they and then he says Captain Tracy is on the surface. Well, but so they beam down. Oh, and that's the teaser. So when they beam down, there's a guy there's a tree stump, and he's about to be executed. About to get his head chopped off by this group of what looked like Mongols, sorry. And so they then that's when Captain Tracy comes out and stops them. And so then he Kirk is basically saying, um, um, hello, DJ Play Nice. Hello, hello. Good evening. Um, so Kirk is basically saying that he suspects that Captain Tracy has violated the Prime Directive, and you know it's pretty obvious to the audience that he has. Um, and So he calls these like savages because they look like, they're wearing loin cloths, or bear skins, or whatever you want to call it, and he calls them Yangs, and he tells them, that there's a virus or some sort of disease that infected his crew and himself, and he says that that if they go beam back up onto the ship, they'll turn out like his crew did, where they turn into like crystals. And so he's basically like, you got to stay. I never beamed up. You got to stay on the planet, or you're gonna turn out like them. So Tracy has been interfering with this civilization. Basically, Spock finds bodies with spent like phaser cartridges, or whatever they're called, which basically tells them that he's been killing off these Yangs, these savage people. And McCoy kind of takes his side and is like, well, he's out here by himself and he's been being attacked, and maybe he's just defending himself. And then Tracy walks into the room as they're saying that and shoots. I think he shoots like their phaser, one of their phasers, and he's like, there'll be no contacting the ship. So he takes Kirk's communicator, contacts the Enterprise, and basically says the Enterprise is infected with this disease, and Captain Kirk is incapacitated at the time. And that's when Kirk yells out, and Kirk and Tracy says that Kirk is delusional and delirious and all this stuff, feverish, stuff like that. And Tracy says that he will stay in communication with the Enterprise, and then they close the communicator, and that's the end of that. After that, Kirk cites Starfleet regulations, about interfering with other civilizations, and frickin' basically Tracy is like, Tracy says, well, you did what you had to do. You said the words that you had to say. Now you're off the hook, okay? So, don't be fucking with me, basically. And then he tells them that the people down on this planet are immune to this disease, and points to one guy who, he's like, how old are you? And he says, well, I'm 44 years old. And he stops the guy and he's like, yeah, but in your years, your cycles, that's 11 cycles. So this guy's like 444 years old. So he basically thinks the planet somehow is like a planet, the fountain of youth. And or virtual fountain of youth, and he wants Bones to like create this serum that other people can take so that they can live longer and stuff like that. So that's like his motivation. Which, if you've ever seen Star Trek Insurrection, the Next Generation movie, it's a similar plot, And we have, throughout Star Trek, we've had crazy admirals and crazy captains and crazy commodores, and they always have like some sort of similar type motivation where they think they're doing the right thing for the Federation or for Starfleet, but then it's wrong-headed, and that it's not a good thing. So about that time, Kirk kind of like jumps Tracy, and they get into a fight, and Kirk loses the fight, and he takes Spock and Kirk into a holding cell, and then takes McCoy to like a lab where he can work on this serum. And then in the holding cell, there's that savage guy that was about to be beheaded, and the Yang, and he's like, Tracy's like, look at this guy, Kirk. He looks like us, but he's savage, and he doesn't, understand things, and all he wants to ever do is fight. Because these are the people that Tracy's been fighting since he got down to the planet. And so he leaves them to it, and Yang looks at Kirk, and Kirk gives him this weird look, and Yang, they start fighting. And then that's when you hear like the classic do 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 do, that classic Star Trek fight music. And the whole time, Spock is like urging Kirk to try to reason with the guy. And Kirk's like, well, I'm trying to reason with him, Spock, but he's not being reasonable. And then at a certain point, Kirk gets like the advantage and the upper hand. And there's a girl with him too, which is, I guess, Yang's girlfriend or whatever. And she's like she's standing in front of Spock, so Spock does the Vulcan nerve pinch on her, and Yang kind of is distracted by that and doesn't understand what's going on, and that gives Kirk time to like get him to the ground. So they're in that cell, and it's like an old Western, cell with like iron bars, and there's a window. It's like a classic, Old West cell. And Spock is like twisting the bars and talking to Kirk as he's twisting them, trying to get them loose. And he's saying how Captain Tracy had mentioned that at one point there was a bustling civilization, but there must have been some sort of war break out. Whether it's a nuclear war or some sort of biological warfare. And that these people fled into the hills, the Yangs, while they call them Combs. And if you haven't seen this episode, which I just suspect that most people probably have, uh, if you haven't, then you probably sort of get a hint at where they're going with this. When watched it as a kid, I didn't really know anything about politics or anything like that, so I didn't put two and two together till the end. But and so Kirk says something about at some point they probably wanted to seek their freedom, and the Yang, the guy, he's like, freedom, and Kirk is like, oh, now you can speak, and so the guy starts helping Kirk take the rods out. They get one rod out, and then the guy like sucker punches Kirk, and they escape. Him and his girl escape, and then the next scene is Kirk is on the floor. He wakes up. He goes up to Spock and he's like, how long was I out? And Spock's like, 7 hours and what does it say? 7 hours and 8 minutes. This is classic Spock, down to the seconds. Data used to do that and annoy the shit out of Picard. But so Kirk looks down on the ground and sees like the key to the cell is down on the ground, and so they grab the key, escape, and go find McCoy, and so then Bones tells Kirk that he thinks that there was some sort of war that happened, and the population was diminished. They had to rebuild the population, and over time, whatever it was, like a chemical warfare or whatever it was, the new population became immune to these effects. So like going back to the ship, they wouldn't turn into like crystals or whatever. And then he basically says, it just takes a little bit longer for the immunization to happen. If the crew the crew of the Exeter would have waited a little bit longer, they could have gone back to the ship and it would have been fine. As that conversation ends, Tracy comes in with a phaser and he's like all wide-eyed. He's all crazy looking, and Bones tells him this same thing. He's like, it's not a fountain of youth. This place is not a fountain of youth. It never was. These people grow old naturally. Like, it's natural for them to live X amount of years, like hundreds of years. But Tracy's hell-bent, and he's definitely hell-bent on getting the Yangs and like killing them. And he forces Kirk to contact the Enterprise, and it's Sulu and Uhura. And where's Scotty? I don't know. I guess he was off that day. But he contacts the Enterprise and wants them to send down more phasers and more backup, like munitions and shit like this. And Kirk is kind of playing along at first, and I wish I should have brought my 2S communicator. Hold on. All right. Let's see. It's not on. Let me turn it on. It's not charged. Never mind. But anyway, he's like got the communicator, and normally it plays like little sounds from the series, and it also acts as like a MP, like a you can hook up, you can listen to music on your phone with it. But so anyway, he tries to he basically tricks Tracy at this point, and he closes he Tracy closes the communicator, and then Kirk like knocks it out of his hand, and they fight again, and then you hear the music again, and so and so they where was I at? So Tracy, so then they get into another fight, and but then at the end of the fight, Tracy has Kirk dead to rights. But then at the end of the fight, the Yangs show up with like spears, and they're pointing at him, and they get captured. So then, as they're sitting there, tied up, Spock, Bones, Kirk, Tracy, the red shirt had died at some point. I don't remember when. Of course, it was early on, within the first 20, 30 minutes. So they're sitting there, Kirk's talking, and he's like, sort of like, talks about the Yangs and the Comms. And that's when it all comes together. Spock says, commies. And Kirk's like, Yangs, Yankees. And Spock says, perhaps it was they had the war that your civilization never had. About that time, there's like a guy drumming and shit, and there's like a ceremony because the Yangs had finally taken back their land, because they are basically depicted as like Native Americans, and they've taken back their land. Yeah. So a guy walks in with an American flag, and so as I'm thinking about this episode and watching this episode, I'm glad that it came on when I'm glad that maybe the universe wanted me to celebrate Independence Day by talking about this episode. And that's how the random generator picked it. I don't know. The Force. I don't know. But guy walks in with the American flag. You hear, yeah. The music swells, and the main Yang guy, who's like the chief, I guess, starts saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but it's all kind of funky. Like it sounds like when somebody's like speaking Spanglish, you know what I mean? Like something like that. And Kirk starts reciting the actual words, and that confuses them. And they're like, how do you know these words? And, who are you? And Captain Tracy's like, oh, they're gods, and they're evil. And he's trying to trick them. And Kirk's like, no, we're not gods. We're just normal people like you. we're from up there, and the stars, they're not anything special. We come from another star, and then the guy brings out like I think it's a Bible. I was trying to eat and watch this at the same time because I had been out doing job interviews today, and I hadn't really eaten, so I think it was a Bible. But they, Tracy goes to Spock and he goes, he's a devil, and so they turn to a page in their Bible or in their book or whatever, and there's a picture of a figure that basically looks like Spock, but kind of devilish. So one guy goes, "Oh, one of them are liars. One of them's lying." And he goes, "Which one is it?" And they pull out this piece of paper and they're like, "Whoever can recite this piece of paper is telling the truth, is not the liar." And Kirk convinces them to. He's like, "Doesn't good always beat evil in your book?" And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Well, let me show you that I can beat evil." So him and Kirk and Tracy are tied together. Their arms tied together. One arm for one arm, and they have to fight to the death. And whoever wins is the good guy in their mind. So while this is going on, Kirk's not doing so hot, and Bones is like, "We got to do something," and all of a sudden you see Spock kind of looking at the girlfriend, and he's like using telepathy to kind of get her to do something for him, and he's basically grabbing the communicator and bringing it to Spock. And so while that's going on, they're still fighting, and the communicator. So then she opens the communicator, and then some Sulu and some other people beam down, and Kirk is like, arrest him, and then Kirk reads out like the opening words of the Constitution, "We the people," and is explaining to the Yangs, what this means and all that stuff, and how it's not just for one group of people, it's for everybody, and that's the connection to like the holiday coming up. So my computer's about to die, so I gotta wrap this up. So I'd say this is a 7.5 out of 10, because for the time and for TOS, there's a good bit of action. There's like 3-4 fights in here, and the message is pretty good. And for the longest time, I liked the crazy admiral, crazy captain, or crazy commodore episodes, even on TNG, you have it. And for the longest time I did like. A lot of people don't, but I did. And I even thought when the Star Trek, the 2009 J.J. Abrams one came out, I was like, you know what they should do for a sequel? Do a Crazy Admiral sequel. Boy, was I wrong. I was wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Yeah, they should not have done that because Star Trek into Darkness was horrible. So I regret that. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up real quick. Well, let's pick the next Sunday. So I do this 2 times a week for anybody that's new to this show. It's called the Red Hour, and I do it 2 times a week on Wednesdays and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's pick the next episode using the random episode generator. And okay, once again I accidentally pressed the button, I guess one night when I was, I don't know, messing around on my phone. So it was TNG, Who Watches the Watchers. I accidentally pressed it. So, which I love that episode, and I do want to review that episode. It's probably fucking top 10 TNG episodes, but because I've set a rule for myself, I'm gonna make it random, and we ended up with, I can't see that, TNG the game. So we ended up with a TNG episode either way. So I want to thank anybody that's out there. I want to thank DJ Play Nice out in the chat, and he's here every episode so far, or she. I don't know. Anybody else that's lurking, anybody that catches this in the future, and happy Independence Day to everyone. Let's hope it's a good one. I will see you guys and girls on Wednesday, hopefully. Yeah, I hope I hear back. I have heard back from a couple of interviews, and we're still okay. It's a dude. Okay. Anyway, thanks for coming out, DJ, Play Nice, and anybody else. Have a good night, and again, enjoy the holiday. That's gonna be it.